My name is Michael Keropian. I've been an artist all my life. I studied in the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts and majored in sculpture. I left and did a number of projects since then. One of the largest sculptures I did would be Comerica Park tigers. There are 9 tigers on the new home of the Detroit Tigers, and that was done in 2000. Average size is 12 foot to the shoulder, 33 feet long. More recently, I've done some projects for my hometown of Manchester, Connecticut. Last year, I finished a 7-foot scale runner, Joe McCluskey, for the town. A couple of years ago, I did a portrait of a Civil War general. His name was Thomas Francis Marr. He was the Irish Brigade General of the 69th, and that was dedicated in Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. Most recently, the town of Fishkill has asked me and commissioned me to do a statue, an 8-foot statue of Daniel Nimham. Daniel Nimham was believed to be the last sachem of the Wappinger people. His life was focused on trying to get lands back that were stolen by the Phillips family. And he also was in the French Indian War. He also fought on the American side in the American Revolution. When he came back from the French Indian War, he realized that his lands had been stolen, the lands of his people. And so he went to court 3 times, and after the second time, he realized that he wasn't getting anywhere. So he was able to travel to England in 1766 with a group of his people, and he met with the Board of Trade under King George, and they realized he had a case. Unfortunately, when he came back, he went to court for the very last time, and they threw it out, saying he had no case. So about that time, he joined up with the Stockbridge Militia, a fighting unit under George Washington, and he fought against the British. Eventually, he and his son, Captain Abraham Nimham, ended up dying at the Battle of Kingsbridge in Van Cortlandt Park in the Bronx. He and Abraham and many of the Stockbridge were some of the first veterans to die for the American cause. It's a significant statue because he should be depicted. He represents not only the Wappinger people, he also represents the Stockbridge Militia Mohican group that he was part of, and he also represents our American veterans. I have a small model here. And this small model was my original concept. I am currently working on a model that's 4 foot in stature. And as you can see, I've created a linen shirt for him. This is just a work in progress, but I've changed the regalia, changed some things in it to suit Daniel, what I believe Daniel would look like. There's symbolism in this statue. There's going to be quite a bit of symbolism. Everything from he was in the Wolf Clan. So if I were to turn this around, you'd see that his quiver has a wolf skin on it. It kind of symbolizes that. A belt that he is going to be wearing, I'm planning on, it was a treaty belt from 1745, and it had 2 hearts. That's probably going to go on his belt. This will add to the story. The tree stump, not depicted too much here, but in the larger version, will be a tree stump. And my reasoning for this is because his life was cut short, and the tree stump and a broken column represent or symbolize a life cut short. And so that's why I want to depict this section over here as a tree stump. Nimham was a negotiator. He negotiated before he picked up arms. So on this side is a survey of the property. The fact that he tried to do things through the court system legally, and then after which he ended up taking up arms in the American Revolution. This is going to be a working model. It was never my intention to depict him at the Battle of Kingsbridge in 1778. Here's his loincloth, his leggings. If he was wearing linen trousers, I'd have to get rid of the loincloth, but I like this because I'm going to put some design in here, and I think it'll add to the sculpture. As soon as I can get this to a point where I like it, it's going to go on my three-dimensional pantograph machine, and I will be tracing it up to the 8-foot scale. I placed the 4-foot model onto a pantograph machine, a manual machine used for enlarging and reducing sculpture. These machines were built to make it faster to enlarge a small sculpture into a large sculpture, or large sculpture into a small sculpture. So the table, or the pantograph itself, consists of 2 tables, and they work with a chain drive, and that allows me to, anytime I move the model on table number 2, table number 1, where the model is, will move. And it allows me, with this pointing machine, to find points in space and to make sure I'm in the right locations. So this is easier than having to do it by resculpting an enlarged version by eye. The sculpture itself is now being traced to this size, an 8-foot statue. In order to do that, I don't want a solid amount of clay. So what I do is I build up an armature in steel and apply styrofoam on top of that, which takes up the bulk of the space, so that when I need to apply clay, the clay is only about a 1/2 inch thick, or whatever I want it to be. So that holds the clay up, and then I use a lot less clay. There's a lot less weight on this. As you can see, I took the lower half of the sculpture off, and I put the upper half on. I didn't put any clay on the quiver yet. I will be doing that. I just wanted to get most of the back to the right height, and then I'll add some to the quiver. I'm not 100% sure I'm going to go with this quiver, but I'm pretty happy with the concept of the wolf head depicting Nimham's wolf clan that he was from. They said at the Battle of Kingsbridge, they had quivers with about 20 arrows in them. So even though I'm not depicting him at the Battle of Kingsbridge, I probably will add approximately 20 arrows in there. I probably won't do too much work on this using the pantograph. My main focus would be to take this off as soon as I can, gathering as much information as I can from this. And then from there, the fun starts. Now I can start to sculpt. As you can see, I've joined the top section with the lower section of the sculpture. So now it's a matter of sculpting, pretty much using free eye and some proportions to compare my models, to compare a life model if I have a life model come. I've filled in the seam where the 2 parts connected. I will be going back and taking the sections off later in the process, but right now I want to get the whole sculpture going as one whole piece. About a year ago, I found this book, and I didn't know there was something similar, but I found this book that had a skull that was dressed in a deer skin attached to a quiver. It was a Lenape quiver. I believe they found around the Delaware River area, about 1638, so a little early than he was, but I thought that was quite a coincidence that they did make a mock wolf head on the quiver someplace. I personally don't want to follow that exactly. I want to leave it up top. I think sculpturally it works better. Could it have been real? They might have. If they had a wolf head on the bottom, they might have had one on top. This is an artistic judgment, more so than a historical one, or completely accurate historically. I've added quite a bit more of the clothing and details to the sculpture. The leggings are becoming a little bit more in detail. I've added a linen shirt, working on the musket, and I thought I'd discuss a little bit of some of the details I'm adding now. So I've decided I wanted to incorporate something about the Hudson River, because the Wappinger people and the Mohicans a majority of them lived on the Hudson River, and they used the river as a resource. The Mohicans, the word Mohican came from the word that means the river that flows both ways, or the river that never stops moving. So I decided on his belt to add something I saw in a painting of a river Indian back in, I believe, painted in England around in the early 1700s. And I thought, you know, the wavy line would represent the Hudson River. And I noticed that this painting has a depiction of this, I believe, Mohican Indian with a belt with the wavy line. So I'm incorporating that in. It's just drawn in right now. I plan to add some beadwork to it, and I believe that'll add to the statue and some of the detail work that's going on. The wampum belt, or what this part here is going to be a wampum belt. And through my research through the last 20 years, I found that a wampum belt of 13 strands with 2 hearts in the middle between 1745 was given to the Wappinger people by the state of New York. I thought that's a great thing to add into the statue, because it's very rare that somebody knows about that, and the belt has never surfaced in a museum or anywhere else. So I just thought I'd like to depict that. The hearts were red in color. This is one of the hearts. This is 45, and I'm still waiting to get more beads to apply to create the second heart, and the 1 and the 7 that will go there. And once that's done, it'll have some strands coming down, maybe some beadwork or whatever. As I go over to this side, we've done quite a bit of work on the moccasins. As you can see, there's some quill work, and I've used rice to create the thread of the stitching of the quill work. I found these beautiful moccasins online. I believe they were from the Great Lakes, but I thought they were quite appropriate for what Nimham might have worn, rather than just plain, you know, he probably had some quill work on his moccasins. They probably came after him a little bit, but I think that they kind of match a lot of the Wappinger quill work that I've seen in some of the museums around here. And so I thought they'd be appropriate. As far as the musket goes, I've decided that I'm going to go with the Charlesville 1766 musket. It's a French musket. It was a bit shorter than the Brown Bess. It was lighter. It was, in my opinion, a little bit more attractive. But it's also, in all the readings and writings that I've read, and contacting curators in West Point and going over there, they all sort of feel that Nimham probably would have been carrying a French musket of some sort. I decided to go with the Charleville 1766 for a couple reasons. I thought it was a little higher end musket than the trade guns that most of the Native Americans were sold. I thought as a chief he would have something a little bit more elaborate. Maybe something like this was given to him. Many of the Charlevilles were, obviously they're made in France, but the French were not at war with Great Britain, and the Americans were ordering these guns. The guns were going from France to the West Indies, and then somebody went down from the coast of Florida with a boat and picked up the load of guns without the English knowing that they were being brought into the country. I've chose an interesting tomahawk. Most of the tomahawks you see are very similar with the head of the tomahawk looking similar to that. This has a spike on the end of it, which the Native Americans could use that way or with the blade side. I was talking through my research. I was able to find a relative of Daniel's, a descendant of Daniel's mother's side of the family. And this tomahawk that he showed me that's in a museum was passed down through generations in the family. And what I loved about it was this, instead of a straight piece of wood, 90 degrees with an axe or a pipe, sometimes they had axes with pipes, that it has this nice sort of S-curve going in. And it's not completed yet. There was a man named John Van Gilder who came around probably around the time that Daniel was around, and he was, I believe, a cousin or relative to Daniel's mother, who was a Mohican woman. And I've added this as kind of a connection to that family. And not too long ago, one of his descendants had shown me an image of a powder horn, which Daniel will carry on his right side. On that side, he'll also have a bag to carry cartridges for the musket, and he'll probably have another bag there for other things. So we will be adding a bow to the quiver, which will probably be attached in this section here, going up. We were able to find a Stockbridge Mohican bow that is in the collection of the Stockbridge Mohican group in Wisconsin in their museum. Even though it's a child's bow, it gives us an idea of what type of bows they may have used. The scroll, or I keep calling it a scroll, but basically it's a representation of a survey. And it's a symbol of the work that he tried to do in the courts to get his people's lands back. If we were to create a historical timeline, it would be after he lost his last battle in court, and he's picking up the musket and going to war or to fight against the British on the American side. Since our last segment, been working more on refining the statue of Daniel Nimham, adding details and refining drapery. Since the last segment also, we have taken some parts off of the sculpture to start the mold process, and also to refine in sections. For instance, I started to make a mold of the musket. I took the mold of the musket, this end off, and the butt end of the musket. I'm not molding the whole thing in one piece. I have to take segments of the sculpture off and make smaller pieces in wax. The foundry could not cast a sculpture this size at once. So what they do is they do it in sections, and I give them wax casts of these sections, and then they're cast in bronze in sections, and then those sections are then welded together, and then the welds are cleaned up so you don't see the weld marks. These are two parts from the sculpture that I've started to paint rubber onto. Once you have your clay sculpture completed, you need to make a rubber mold in order to make a positive wax, a wax of your sculpture. As you can see, the shims divide the piece in two, so I can take the mold apart. As we proceed to add layers of rubber, we also thicken the rubber until we get to about a 1/4 inch layer, after which we'll add some keys that will help us lock the rubber into what's called a mother mold or a plaster shell. The plaster shell is simply to back up the rubber. As you can imagine, if I peeled the finished rubber off of the sculpture, it's going to flop all over and I'm going to lose my basic shape of the sculpture that I had. So the plaster is kind of like a bone structure to kind of support the rubber. When the piece comes apart, the important thing is that I get a good mold that collects all the detail as it should. Once I have this mold, I'll be able to paint wax into it to a certain thickness, and I can replicate my musket and sculptures. So this is the first part of the process of making the molds. You can see I've taken the top section of the mother mold away and the rubber, and what I've got is a hollow wax. Right now we're going to be taking off this arm, and that will be then molded separately from the main body. Get it? Starting to get something? Yeah, that's right.
Good job.
You got it? Yeah. All right. Thank you. I'm going to be mixing some silicone rubber up. It's a two-part tin-based silicone, Mold Max 30 to be precise. And then I'm going to be applying a thin coat onto the surface of the clay. After all the coats of rubber are applied to this, we will then be making the mother mold with the plaster, the burlap, and the conduit. And that will support the rubber. And then we can take the mold apart and begin cleaning the mold of the clay and everything else in order to start making a wax. I want to remove the wax, and I'm taking apart the mother mold first, and then I'll peel the rubber off, and hopefully we have a good wax under here. There we go. Here's a wax with a little flashing. I'm going to check on the positioning of this on the sculpture. This is now the wax where the clay once was. I have to work the clay before I make the mold here to align things up a little better, but it's pretty much tight, pretty close. How you doing? Almost done? So you got to get in under those moccasins, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're now applying our third coat of rubber. Previously we had added the shims, the metal dividers that divide up the mold sections. See, there's a little air bubble in here. Now, the rubber's pushing away. I pushed it in. You see how I'm pushing the air out of one side. That's because there was drip here. But I want to make sure that's sealed in. I don't want any air in there. So that's why it's a little harder than just applying a spray coat of rubber on here. You have to actually be thinking of the shape. We had finished putting the rubber on the sculpture. It's about 1/4 inch thick, and we've added rubber keys that will lock into the plaster mother mold. That's what we're working on now. So a first layer of plaster is applied to the rubber, and after which they will be laying on burlap and then conduit and building up the edges a little bit. Yeah, if you have to steal it from William, go ahead. Burlap you need it here. We are finishing up the plaster mother molds on the top sections, and we'll be taking the molds apart. Then we'll be taking the rubber off the clay and starting the waxes. Yeah, you just had to go under that arm. There you go. Okay, you have it. It's loose.
Now, this is right.
I'm removing the rubber from the clay. Then we have to clean the rubber out. Some places you can see it's coming off real nice, and other places it's sticking, so we have to clean it. We've spent some time cleaning out the clay that sticks to the rubber sometimes, and as you can see, the texture from in the negative, you can see the texture of my sculptural tools and some of the wampum bead that was on the belt, and now we're pretty much prepped for making a wax of this. There's a positive clay, there's a negative mold. This is the negative mold, and from the negative mold we have to make a positive wax, and from the positive wax we then make another mold over that, which is a ceramic mold, and then we melt out the wax, called the lost wax process, and then we pour the molten metal in, and that becomes our third positive. So we have a clay positive, a wax positive, and a bronze positive, and in between that are the two molds, the rubber mold and the ceramic mold. And the ceramic mold is discarded, and that's the end of that. And then you have a bronze after it's been poured. We've taken off the torso mold sections and cleaned them out. It took a while to take out the plastiline that sticks to the surface of the silicone rubber. And now then once they were cleaned, we put the molds back into the mother molds, and we began making waxes. This here is part of the leg with a wax inside of it. Here is the upper section of the torso that I'm now reworking. We've added the top section of the wax to the lower section of the torso wax, and we need to do this before it goes to the foundry. The reason I do this is, even though you've made a mold, sometimes parts of the wax, when you paint the wax, they warp or they change in shape a little bit. So I want to make sure that this top layer, here's your seam line all the way around, I want to make sure that this is in line, because if it doesn't connect properly and this is pushed in or this is pushed out too far or whatever, when they get it in bronze, it won't fit together properly, and they'll have to do some major adjusting to get it to match up. What we need to do is clean up any little missing beads. You know, there are a couple little air bubbles in here where, like for instance, this bead got broken off. So what I'll do is take some wax and put that in. This is the mold of Daniel Nimham's head. I'm going to start painting in wax and building it up to about 1/4 inch to 3/8 of an inch. The back side of the mold is over here. I've already applied some wax to that. And once I get this wax completed to the right thickness, then I'll close that part of the mold, and I'll go in through his neck and fill in the seams to connect the two pieces of wax together. Daniel Nimham's head is one of the last parts of the sculpture that I need to make a wax of. The wolf head and the ponytail and some of the smaller things are being cast at the end. So I'm working on the reworking of the head, the hollow head of wax, as you can see. Where I had the mold lines, you could see the seam line. So I had this one section that was the back piece of the mold, and then I had a mold for the front section. So I have to clean up this to match the surface of his skull match up the hair, clean up the feathers in the back here, and the ears and so on. So this is my second attempt to clean up the sculpture, get it ready for bronze. As far as the necklace goes, I've decided on giving him a couple bear claws on a necklace that has representation of a coyote bones and some beadwork. After talking to some local descendants of the Wappinger people, I've decided I might add a pendant of sorts that looks kind of like oak tree, based on a very primitive sort of medallion that is encircled by a circle of metal, and that will then attach to the center part of the necklace. Here's the hole for the earring in his lobe. It's starting to stick. I got to heat up the tool. So this hole here, I'll probably drill out, well, either now before it's in bronze or when it's in bronze. And I've thought about a ring that will go in here, quite common, that the ring will come out, not necessarily big, but maybe about 2 inches diameter. And then on that will be hanging several pieces. They used to take, the Native Americans used to like the metal. They buy silver pieces and cut them up and make them into earrings. So I thought a semi-triangular shape attached to the circle of that ring of bronze, and then that will go on to that. And then because they'd be loose, it's probably a good idea to weld them, the little pieces of triangle on there, right? Probably a good idea to tack them, weld them to his collar, which comes up almost to his neckline. In sculpture, there's a thing called color. It has nothing to do with pigment. What it has to do with is the gradation of light hitting a subject. By pushing in the iris and creating a pupil in there, I'm able to use the shadow of his upper eyelids to create an illusion of dark eyes. Now, if he had blue eyes, what would I do? Well, I would bring out this iris so that it was more flush with the surface of the cornea. And then, in which case, his eyes wouldn't look as dark. They'd be more light. So I'm finishing up the reworking of the head, and I've got the wolf head to do and the ponytail. I'll clean all those up, and we have the base pieces here, and then I'll be taking a trip down to the foundry and dropping them off, and hopefully our next trip to the foundry we'll be able to get some video of the gating process and the ceramic shell process, which will be the next steps to all this. I'm in independent casting foundry in northern Philly today. All the waxes are now down in the foundry. Most of the pieces are still in wax, and some have been gated, and some are going to be gated, and some are in ceramic shell. This is the wax room, rework room, and gating room. So this is part of the survey, and you can see it's gated. This is a pour spout. When you pour the molten metal in, it'll run to the bottom and start filling up. You can see these green gates that are angled this way. This will start filling up in bronze, and as it comes out, the air, any air that's inside, will come out this vent. So that's pretty much what it is. You'll see this eventually when it's in ceramic shell, covered with ceramic shell, and then they're going to melt the wax out and pour the molten metal in. But this plumbing system is necessary. Now you can see wherever they attached it to the survey that these areas will have to be worked on in metal, because everything will be metal that you see here. The pour spout, the gates, the sculpture. So they'll have to cut these off in bronze and then finish it with grinding tools and other types of tools in order to match the texture that I sculpted onto the surface. This is the ceramic shell room, where the ceramic shell is put around the wax, inside and outside. As you can see, this is the back end of the musket, and you'll see the gate, the wax gate that was put on, and the cup for pouring metal, and all this is attached to the wax. We saw that in the gating section, and here you'll see even these smaller gates going to the flintlock and different mechanism of the musket. As you can see, this is probably just one coating of ceramic mixture, and this has to be dried out thoroughly, and then they put in at least probably 8 more coats of ceramic mixture. Each has to dry, and then they add another layer upon layer. Eventually you'll get something that's much thicker, which supports the wax inside. So this is the ceramic, the cup, the gate, the main gate. The metal will be eventually, when this is a full mold, the wax will be melted out, and the molten metal will come in, go down the main gate, and come in and start to raise up through the musket. And because of these little areas that have 1/4 inch and little spaghettis, that will allow air that would be trapped otherwise to escape. So you can see this was part of the tomahawk handle. I think this is the knife sheath that was cut off of the front of Nimham. They're getting ready. The next time you see these will probably be either being melted, the wax being melted out. That's where you get the lost wax part of it. And then the molten metal will be poured in. Hopefully we will be able to show you a pour of a number of the pieces being cast. We have a few more pieces of wax that have got covered over with a ceramic shell mixture. This is the wolf head right here. You can see the ears and the nose right there. Here we have the hand, the right hand. You'll see my hand above it, the fingers and the thumb, and the wrist where it was cut off. So inside is the wax hand, and it has a wax gating. When you put all these coatings of ceramic shell on, it's very easy to forget what's inside. Obviously it's a wax, but how do I know it's my piece? They're smart, and they can put my initials on the clip. Here we are, we're looking at the head of Daniel Nimham, covered with ceramic shell. This is his nose, his eyes over here, his ear, full head. Part of the back of his head was probably cut off, and that's going to be cast separately because they need to get ceramic shell not only on the outside of the form, but on the inside as well. So right now, the wax has been melted out of the ceramic shell, and now they're heating up the empty ceramic shell and in the autoclave over here. They're also heating up the bronze in a crucible. When this is ready and the temperatures are right, they'll remove the ceramic shells that are warmed up. They'll place them down in a section on the ground. They'll go in, open up the crucible, pick the crucible up, bring it over and pour the molten metal in. This is the lost wax process. So here we have the first pieces coming out in bronze. This is the base piece. It was done in sections. You can probably see the shiny areas. So something this large could not be poured at one time. You could see here, this was a separate piece from this, and they're starting to finish the sculpture now. That means going in, filling this with weld, and then grinding it to match the texture that I sculpted. See the same thing over here. And they're going to work obviously from the ground up. We're here to see the bronze tacked together. It's been a couple months since I had the clay at 8 foot in the studio, so it's great to start seeing the sculpture coming together. The sculpture was cast in a number of pieces. There's probably 30 or more pieces that were cast separately and welded together. In some areas you can obviously see lines like over here where this section here was welded to this, and they haven't done what's called finishing work. Finishing work is matching the texture that I put in clay. So if I used a rake tool, which I did see all these lines are from a metal rake tool, it's their job, the finisher, to bring that back in bronze. So when they weld, it doesn't automatically create that texture. So what they did here is they welded this together, but they haven't done the texture. There was also a division here. And you can see there's a little bit of bead work they'll need to clean up. But there was a line going through here. And you could see that when they did cut this section out, wherever that section may be, it could have been in the top of the leg, came over, come up. Maybe it looks like it went past these beads and up, right about there. They avoided the wampum belt. And why would you do that? Well, because look how hard that would be to replicate in grinding. So you try to save time, you try to save money certainly, but you also want to keep the standard of quality up. And a good foundry will match this where you don't see it. So whatever texture it is. It could be wood grain, it could be feathers, it could be rock. They match it so you don't see it. So the next time I visit the foundry again, they'll have a lot of this stuff all finished, welded and finished. And I'll just come over and I'll look around, and I might even take up the grinder and do some work if I see something that maybe I missed in clay that got transferred into bronze. So that's really the next step. This was a step to make sure this figure was standing up properly, that the head was in the right position. Once the sculpture's to my satisfaction, we'll be going and getting it patinaed in a coloration, which is patination, which is heating up the metal and adding chemicals to it to create a certain color. At this point, all the welding has been chased. You can't see really any of the joints at all. The whole piece has been sandblasted. We added some details and things to it the last time I was here, and I just checked the bronze out. It looks really good. So what we're going to be doing next is getting the sculpture ready for a patina, which they'll do some wiring to it to bring up the finish, and then they'll start applying the patina to it.
I'm Melanie Serkis. I'm the patinist here at Independent Casting in Philadelphia, and I'm working on Michael Keropian's patina for his Daniel Nimham sculpture. We're going to start by prepping the surface with a Scotch-Brite wheel. I'm going to start at the bottom here with the tree roots and the base. And the idea behind this initial surface prep is to open the pores of the metal and to brighten up the surface as well to accept the color that we want for the patina.
The finishing work is completed, and all Melanie has to do is Scotch-Brite the whole statue, which you've seen, and apply the patina. I chose the brown. I was going back and forth with adding a green to it and this and that, and I wasn't too happy with any of that. I don't want the sculpture dark, then you won't notice any of the surface area or the modeling that I spent time putting into it.
This is the patina sample that Mike has chosen for his sculpture, and it's a beautiful choice. We're going to do first a couple of different layers of weak acids. They're called nitrates, and with the combination of heat and these acids, I'm going to get these different colors. So the first color you see will be done with the ferric nitrate, which gives the warm brown tones, the goldens, the honeys, and that'll be our base layer. And then I will use a little bit of cupric nitrate, which is a copper-based nitrate, and gives the greens that we'll see in some of the recesses. So now the surface of the metal is hot enough for me to begin applying the ferric nitrate. From here I can go straight into the cupric nitrate. The final step for this patina will be sealing the whole sculpture with a coat of wax. I will apply it to the surface while the bronze is warm. And then once it's cool, I will apply a second coat of wax, and this helps protect both the color as well as the metal itself. So when Mike comes the next time to see the sculpture, we're going to have it all completed for him.
Nice job, really great job.
You did it. You're right there, take loop.
With sculpture, it's inevitable that you have to color it or put a patination on it. We chose this brownish color combination with some green and some brown, and I really liked it. But until it's actually on the whole piece, it's very difficult to see how it will look. I was concerned that a patina of this sort would get too dark, but I think once we're outside, this is going to be beautiful. Everything shows up, the details. I couldn't ask for more. I wouldn't want it lighter at this point or too warm brown. I think right now it's great. I have no complaints. I'm very happy with the result. This is fantastic. Couldn't have done a better job. We're about ready to strap it up and place it on the truck and transport it up to Fishkill. A little straighter.
Yeah, you're there.
We're going to wrap them up with the blankets, maybe add some shrink wrap to them. There's debris and stuff that could happen on the highway, just to try to protect it on the way up. We have a 2.5, 3 hour drive ahead of us, so just want to protect it. I often forget how much time I put into this statue, sculpting it. Here we are at the Daniel Nimham sculpture site. Today we started breaking ground at the location. So we're in the process of digging the ditch for the footing. We need to, as code, we have to get down to 50 inches and pour a footing and then create a slab so that we have a base for our sculpture pedestal, which will hold the sculpture. Sculpture is going to weigh about 2 tons, and the base cap piece that's going to go on top of the base or the pedestal is going to weigh about 2 tons. So we have to go do things by code and make sure this thing doesn't sink. Last week we finished the footing. We dug a hole, had to go up to certain depth for a freezing line and built a footing, poured a concrete slab. Last week we also started the base and finished the base up. Right now there's some stone fascia. We're still working on that. And today we're going to be adding the cap piece to the very top.
We're good.
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 Nice job. So we brought the sculpture up from Philadelphia. Today we're actually installing the sculpture onto the base at the site. Right now they're currently drilling 4 holes that will correspond with 4 bolts that will come out of the bottom of the sculpture. Once they're done with the holes, they clean them out. They bring the sculpture up, put the bolts on, and do what's called a dry fitting. That means going into the holes, making sure everything's loose, there's no snags. When they eventually add adhesive, it will go down without an issue. Right now they're threading the 3/4 inch bolts into the bronze sculpture. That's the way it's going to be mounted, with some epoxy into the base. This sculpture won't be coming down anytime soon.
All the way, fingers. All the way. All the way. Outside. Tommy, anything showing in the front? Boxing, nothing? Okay. Step it down.
The sculpture has been mounted to the base, and right now the adhesive is adhering to the bolts. It's all tightened and it's all on there. After lunch, we're going to come back and do install the plaque. We're getting ready right now to attach the back plaque. The back plaque is one that we recently did. It has my name, the supervisor's name, and the board. The front plaque is the 1937 plaque. They had a dedication to Daniel Nimham, and I thought, even though it was old, we could refurbish it and repatina the plaque and then reinstall it. We're going to put a strap around the base to hold the plaques in until the epoxy sets. So the sculpture is up, and the plaques are on. We've strapped the plaques just until the adhesive cures, and then we'll be taking that off in a couple hours, and it's done. It looks great. I think I couldn't do any better of a job, and I really, I'm just sitting here looking at it. I need time to kind of digest it all. It's been a couple years of working on this, 20 years if you look way back, and I'm just so happy that it's come to this point. It's great.
Thank you all for being here today. Today, the son of Fishkill comes home. Today he takes his proper place in history. Today, Sachem Daniel Nimham joins the ranks of Americans who we honor and remember as heroes. A man who led his people, a statesman who lobbied for equality and justice, a warrior who laid down his life so others might live free. Fishkill's own Daniel Nimham.